Hi, good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening on our part one of our two-part series of the hormone connection wellness strategies for perimenopause and menopause. We're excited about this conversation today. Um, I'd like to introduce my co-host here tonight with us is Miss Lena Landis of Landis Nutrition and Functional Medicine. Lena is a um, well worth of knowledge, has a well worth of knowledge in nutrition and how to manage nutrition throughout the life span of both men and women, but she concentrates mostly on women in perimenopause and menopause. Lena, would you like to tell everyone a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a certified nutrition specialist. And what that means is I work with a lot of my clients to get to the root cause of their symptoms. So, like you mentioned, perimenopause, we'll cover a lot of that tonight, but we really work to change around their diet and different things going on in the lifestyle. And we come up with a personalized plan to get them feeling their best, whether that's through food or supplements or both.
And I'm Dr. Mary Ojo Cairns of Climax Aesthetic Surgery, sexual medicine physician, and also cosmetic gynecologist. And I'm so excited, Lena, to be talking about this with you because it's a topic that many women um, have been talking about more and more recently, but all women, if we're blessed with life, we're going to be going through. And so that's understanding what perimenopause and menopause is, the shift, signs and symptoms, and the change in needs of our health, because there are a lot of changes. And so I'm going to start us off, Lena. And mostly what I'm going to be talking about is just the basics. What is hormone therapy? Because in menopause, our hormones do shift. And so those shifts oftentimes cause many symptoms. Um, Even if you don't feel symptoms of menopause, the symptoms that most people discuss are hot flashes, night sweats. Even if you don't feel those symptoms, you are still symptomatic because of that hormone shift. And hormone therapy can help with those symptoms. And so a hormone is just a chemical substance. It's a chemical that is produced by in our body in different organs. And when we're talking about the hormones of menopause, we're mostly talking about sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, and they're secreted mostly in our ovaries. Our ovaries are what makes us into women because we're secreting more and more estrogen from those organs. And so so those are the organs that or those are the hormones that we're talking about. Estrogen therapy, estrogen progesterone therapy, and testosterone therapy. Those are all parts of hormone therapy. And so, what is estrogen? There are many different forms of estrogen, actually. It's not just one molecule. Our most potent type of estrogen is called estradiol. That's what we produce the most in our ovaries. And so, then when we start to lack that estrogen, when we start to lack that hormone, we start to have many symptoms. Now, we do have hormones that come from our adrenal glands. Those glands are the organs right above our kidneys. They do produce a small amount of hormone, but not that much as our ovaries do. So when we go through menopause and our ovaries stop functioning, it has an influence on all parts of our body. The most important being our brain. Right behind that, I would say our bone and our heart. And so, even if you're not having symptoms, the classical symptoms of menopause, hot flashes and sweats, you are still symptomatic because you do have changes that occur in your brain, you have changes that occur in your heart, and you have changes that occur in your bone, besides other organs that actually increase your chance of many chronic diseases and disorders. Cognitive dysfunction decreases because of lack of estrogen. Heart disease increases because of of estrogen, and osteoporosis increases because of a lack of estrogen. Right behind estrogen, we have progesterone. That's another hormone that our bodies greatly need that are produced in our ovaries. And so this is the hormone of pregnancy. This is the hormone that increases when we're pregnant. And when we're not pregnant, it's usually at a lower level, but it doesn't make it any less important. Plays a huge role in how our brains function and how we're able to process. We have receptors for progesterone all over our body. And so When we lack progesterone, we also become symptomatic in many ways. And those ways can be in how our skin is nice and soft and elastic, how strong our bone is. Our ability to sleep is directly linked to our progesterone levels. And so you oftentimes find women in perimenopause, menopausal age that cannot sleep. They have insomnia. And a lot of that is because of how our estrogen and progesterone. So this is a really techie, this is a really scientific slide, but I think it's really important to understand how those hormones interplay during our menstrual years. So those are the years that we have our periods, and then in our post-menstrual years, so in menopause, really. Um, and you can see both of these hormones, your estrogen and your progesterone, they go up and down just like with our menstrual cycle. And then after menopause, they just go all the way down. And so we become symptomatic. Now, in perimenopause, they do whatever they want to do. And so that's why we have a lot of these fluctuations in perimenopause, especially with those who are still menstrual, those who are still bleeding, those who still have their uteruses or uteri. That's the reason, because every day's a different day. One hormone that we don't talk enough about is testosterone. Testosterone is a sex hormone. It is a female sex hormone, but we oftentimes relate testosterone to men because men make more testosterone. Testosterone is an androgen. And so we get most of our testosterone again from our ovaries, the same place that we get our estrogen and our progesterone. Um, for us women, we do have another type of male-like hormone. I do term it that because it's a little easier to understand it, called DHEA. That's produced in our adrenal gland, again, those organs above the kidney. We make more of that, but it's a lot weaker than testosterone. So what does testosterone do? Well, what we mostly know about testosterone is that it impacts our libido, our desire for sex, our drive for sex, but it does so much more than that. It gives us our energy. It helps us in how our bodies hold on to fat and also where our bodies place fat. It helps with our mental clarity. It does help with our bone strength. And so what we do know is although we have lower amounts of testosterone, it doesn't make it any less important. We need it. There are some studies that show most women actually start to feel their best when their testosterone levels are above 70. If you're looking at a lab value, most labs say that a normal range can be anywhere from 5 to 50. So that's a huge range, right? And it really depends on where you are in life, where you are in perimenopause. Menopause, understanding that it goes usually low below 5. But if you look at this information here to the left, you can see that about less than 30, most of these symptoms start to arise. And so if you're riding at a level around 5, you're going to be pretty symptomatic. So there's a lot of talk about bioidentical hormones versus synthetic hormones. What does that mean? And we'll get more into this in part two, or when we talk about, hey, what can you do to help your hormonal dysregulation during perimenopause and hormonal deficit during menopause? But I want to bring this up here. Bioidentical and identical, they really just, or bioidentical and synthetic, they really just refer to the shape of the molecule of the hormone. Again, remember these are chemical hormones. It just refers to the shape and actually how well the body will receive that hormone, how well the body will use that hormone. It doesn't refer to the safety or if it's natural versus unnatural, really. And so, again, we'll go a little bit more into that during part two. I want to go ahead and turn it over to Lena now um, to continue our discussion. And Lena, I'm going to go ahead and pull your slides up.
Okay, perfect. there it is. All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much. I thought that that was a great overview of um, our sex hormones. I know that's a question I get a lot with my clients. They often say, like, I went through puberty how many years ago and I got my period, or I'm on birth control, a lot of these things that relate to our sex hormones, but they're like, I still don't understand it. I don't know what's going on in my body. So I think that this is a great discussion that we're having here today. And I hope that we can continue it and that more people feel comfortable asking these questions and bringing up the symptoms that they might be experiencing as well. So I want to talk more about the nutrition side of perimenopause and menopause. And very quickly, I will go through common symptoms, lab markers, functional tests, dietary changes, and then some supplement protocols that I find that I use pretty frequently. So common symptoms, we kind of covered in the beginning, but this is a pretty long list and not everything is on here, but these are probably the most common symptoms and complaints that I get with women coming in. And so it's that chronic fatigue where you're tired from the moment that you step out of bed. Um, you might not, you're tired all day, but then when it's time for bed, it's very hard to fall asleep, or you're tossing and turning all night, whether that's from the hot flashes, night sweats, or just your mind racing. Weight gain is another big symptom that we see when it feels like you haven't changed anything in your diet. You're still doing the same things that you've always done before. Then maybe you go to the doctor and you step on the scale and you're up 5 or 10 pounds. The muscle aches and pains, headaches, migraines, um, urinary incontinence, vaginal dryness, low libido, all very common symptoms. So when you go in for your annual appointment, you often get these labs drawn and they're pretty basic, but you might realize that some of these numbers have shifted from the year before. And like I mentioned, you might not have changed anything within your diet, but things like your cholesterol levels all of a sudden are completely out of whack. So if you are not having these things checked by your primary care provider, we would encourage you to do so at that annual appointment. And if these are labs that your doctor usually runs for you, then it's important to really tune into what your results are and figure out a way through diet or supplementation to correct some of these numbers. We talked about the sex hormones, but we really do see a shift in a lot of hormones throughout the lifespan. And during perimenopause and menopause, we will sometimes see changes in other areas as well. So we kind of alluded to this, but cardiovascular things change, metabolic things change, gut health changes. So it affects more hormones, I think, perimenopause in general, than you might think at first glance. So, functional tests are something that I love to run with my clients if they're willing to do so. Some of the more common functional medicine tests that you might be familiar with are the Dutch hormone testing, which is for sex hormones. GI-FX is a stool test. So, we get a really good idea of the different bacteria that's in your gut, good and bad bacteria, the diversity of the gut, the richness of the gut. It can give us a lot of clues as to what's going on. Metabolomics is another great test that has organic acids. It tests for inflammatory markers. The NutriVal really covers a lot of nutrients within the body, so your vitamins, your minerals. It gives us lots of information and it's very personalized, right? Each one of these tests goes through what is going on inside of you, which is helpful for when we want to build out a personalized protocol with supplements and dietary changes. The DEXA scan and lipid panel are things that your primary care provider could probably order for you, but they are also worthwhile during perimenopause and menopause to see bone density and then how your cholesterol levels have changed. So dietary changes. This probably seems pretty elementary as far as things that you could do to improve your health, but it's often the first place that we start in order to change some of these lab values. So, one of the biggest things that you might be realizing is you can't handle your alcohol like you used to. So, of course, we recommend either reducing your alcohol intake or eliminating it altogether. You might find that you're a little bit more sensitive to caffeine. So you might have to just be more intentional about what time of day you are drinking your coffee, or maybe even cutting yourself off at a certain point. A lot of times I'll say, no later than 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the afternoon at the absolute latest, but really trying to limit yourself to maybe 1 cup of coffee earlier in the morning. Reducing or eliminating the consumption of fried, sugary, and processed foods. So, really getting into the habit of reading food labels and understanding what exactly you're putting into your body. Of course, increasing your consumption of both animal and plant based proteins, because our muscles become weaker the older that we get. So, we really want to build up that muscle. And if we are gaining weight, it's a good thing to focus on to help speed up that metabolism. Um, and to lose that weight. And then eating a variety of fruits and vegetables. And of course, just getting into the kitchen and cooking more, eating out way less often. Supplements are an area that people are always interested in. If we can use food first, I always prefer that approach. But we can't always get the things that we need in high doses through foods. So it's nice to have a plan B and fall back on these supplements. So the left side of the screen, the omegas, calcium, vitamin D, phytonutrients, probiotics, fiber, protein. That stuff's all pretty common. I would say the list on the right is a little bit uncommon and more so geared toward perimenopause specifically. You'll see in parentheses, I have a lot of the symptoms that these supplements can often attack or cover. So most of the things on that list are adaptogens, and they really help our body to adjust to the stress that it might be experiencing, the changes that it's experiencing. I probably would not recommend that you do all of these at one time, but they're specific for certain symptoms. And it's nice to know that we have these options out here to try them to see if they can help. And that's all I have.
So, Lena, what would you say? Thank you for that. One question I do have
Yeah.
that I feel like I get oftentimes, and what would you say is more important exercise wise once you reach perimenopause and menopause? Would you say it's the cardio
No,
or
I think
the muscle building?
I think the muscle building is really the
Hmm.
first thing that comes to mind. I think they're both important, really. I do, but I think in my experience, I've found that the older that people get, the more scared maybe they are to get into the gym to lift those weights, whether it's because they don't have a whole lot of experience doing it or they feel out of place. But I think lifting weights 3 times a week, heavy weights, in
Hmm.
order to build that muscle, but also build that bone density. I think the
Hmm.
conversation shifts when we start to focus on weight. And if weight is a struggle, then I think making sure that we're getting that cardio in, that's also important.
Hmm. Hmm. From those that are with us on this webinar, this is a free space and it's an open space. So I want to make sure that everyone gets their answers or their questions answered if you have any. So feel free to put your questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute your mic, you're also welcome to do that. In this series, we talked a little bit about adaptogens and and what they're there for, what they're meant for, which is just to, improve status, to help you adapt to where you are. And I think there's more and more talk about them in the news and media. I know in my practice, I use them a lot as medications, and as forms of therapy. Um, which one do you find more important from the adaptogens? If you had to just like pick one that you like to recommend.
I think it depends on the symptoms. So I think like ashwagandha probably gets the most attention,
Hmm.
but I don't always think that that's like the best one to start out with. I think that's what's covered the most in the media. Um, I like the black cohosh, and I
Hmm.
also like the holy basil.
Hmm.
I think it's dependent upon symptoms too, and then not everybody responds the same way. So sometimes I'll try something with one person and it will really work, but it
Yeah.
won't work as well for the next person.
Because
What
you're
about
right,
you?
dosing is different. Dosing depends on the manufacturer. And,
Yep.
the funny thing is, so I feel like black cohosh used to be like the main go-to back in the day for any type of perimenopausal symptom. And you still find it in a lot of over-the-counter products like Estrovan
Hmm.
or those types of products for hot flashes. But there's a subset of women that it doesn't make any impact at all.
Right.
Um, so
Yeah.
so but I think it's really important to understand that there is a variety because you're right. It's not just, I talk a lot about hormone therapy. My mindset is if you're healthy enough, you should continue hormone therapy, start hormone therapy and continue it well into whenever you want to stop, as long as your heart's healthy enough. But there are a litany of options or many options for just support when you're perimenopausal, when you're not ready to start hormone therapy. You're
Hmm.
still producing that estrogen, you're still producing progesterone, but that fluctuation throughout menopause is just all over the place, and you need something to support what you already produce and how your body uses it. So there are many, many options for that that are really that work very well. It's really just knowing that they're available. And the good thing is, we're talking about this more.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. What do you do for those patients that you have come in that maybe don't love the idea of pharmaceuticals, but
mhm.
like the benefit to that hormone replacement therapy? What does that conversation look like for you in practice?
Well, I think you know me. I love talking about science, and so sometimes I get too scientific. But I really think it's breaking down the misconception of what hormones are,
Hmm.
right? I think that's the first place, and really going into detail about how we got to where we are, where we've almost we scare people away when we
Hmm.
talk about hormones because in menopause, that is the only physiological state in which someone will not replace your deficiency of that hormone.
Hmm.
The whole way our bodies function are through, I love that slide that you showed. The way our bodies function are through a litany of different types of hormones. And so if your thyroid is off, somebody's going to replace that,
Hmm.
right? They're not going to let you go without. So menopause is, and perimenopause and menopause are um, a different state for many physicians and providers because of what we've been taught, and
Hmm.
that information was incorrect or is
Right.
incorrect. And so just breaking that down, I think helps to reveal the truth about what these sex hormones are, and used on in the right person, in the right dosage, in the right route, they're relatively safe. Um, and there's always this big conversation between synthetic or fake hormones and natural, real hormones. And I go into that a lot too,
Hmm.
um, because, Premarin, oral Premarin, which is a hormone that a lot of people, start off with when they're perimenopausal, um, that's a natural hormone. The source is not a source that many people would want to use, because it is an animal source, it's an animal urine source, but
Okay.
is a natural hormone. Whereas you can pick up some um, like progestin cream over the counter um, for or progestin cream like in the store, and that's a phytoprogestin. It's coming from a plant based. That Premarin estrogen from the horse urine is going to work better for you than the progesterone yam cream in the
Yeah.
store. And it's just literally how your body absorbs it, right?
Okay.
And that also kind of depends on who you are metabolically. So it's a long conversation because I'd like people to have like that true answer, but all of it really comes down to your source matters, your symptoms matter, and then your source matters, and then how you take it up matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, we have about 5 more minutes left. I just want to be mindful of time. Any insights you want to give on our next topic, part two of the series?
I mean, I think we're just going to dive even deeper into different strategies to deal with perimenopause and menopause.
Hmm.
I think, unfortunately, there's such a negative connotation, right? That we all just have to suffer through it,
Yeah.
and so I love having this conversation and hopefully giving people not only the space to talk about it, but the hope that it can actually be a really wonderful thing that we can journey through.
Yeah, completely right. Yeah, and I'm excited to go through the options because it's not just one. It's not just an oral pill, and it's not just a medication, right?
Mhm.
There are many different ways to live your life in perimenopause and menopause in a very happy and fulfilled way with minimal symptoms, if any symptoms at all. And and just to be a healthier person. I think one of the biggest things we need to remove from the minds of women is that you have to suffer through it and there's no option in a way to make you feel better. That's
Right.
completely false.
Yeah.
Completely false. So
Yeah, I agree.
thank you, Lena. I'm so excited about part two. So we're re-airing this next week on Tuesday, and then the following um, week. Let me just make sure I have this on my calendar. So the following December 5th, we'll be doing part two.
I can't wait. It should be a
Okay.
fun discussion.
Yeah. Thanks, Lena. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a good night.
Thank you. You too.